All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get started here. And my name is Steve Miller, and I'll be attempting to moderate this motley crew of 5 renowned experts in the world of Volkswagen. We'll share some thoughts, their visions, just where we are in the hobby, and any questions at the end that you guys would like to ask. We'd like to welcome you to ask those questions. We'll start by introducing everybody, going from my right. Our chief cheerleader, Mike Yager of Mid-America Motorworks. Then we've got Larry Molina. He's president of J&L International. Owner of Midwest AutoSavers and VW Restorer, Darby Milnor. We've got founder and owner of BBT VW Parts, that's Bob Van Heyst. And then last but not least, our friendly Welshman on the end, Richard Davies. We're going to start with basically just some simple questions to, let me get away from this. Some simple questions just to kind of get things rolling here. To start off with, and we're just going to kind of open it up to the panel to discuss freely. So we'll start with, if you could have any air-cooled Volkswagen ever made, what would it be and why?
I think Bob ought to handle that. Let's hear the European side of that.
Collecting VWs is different. The longer you get into, the more different you look into it, and the more diversified. After professionally and unprofessionally, personally collecting Volkswagens, I must admit that the diversity still expand to me. So my favorite Volkswagen, when I should have like one, it's different like my wife. That's easy. I have one wife. Cars I like too much. I need a lot. I need at least one favorite bus, one favorite Ghia, one favorite coach build, one favorite of everything. But if you talk buses, I think 23 windows are very nice. Or like extreme utilities, like wooden ladder trucks, I like very much. And bugs, I'm like a vintage type of guy, so I like split window Beetles, split window convertibles, Hep Muellers, all this very exotic and hard to find things, and that keeps the challenge alive for me. So if you go like for Ghias, I mean, we spotted a white Ghia with a beige roof yesterday, convertible. We liked it very much, and I think all that has to see with color combinations. But that's appealing. I mean, at least the eye wants something you want to buy, but the money has to pay for. So, all in general, it would be very, very hard to say what's your favorite car. I think the favorite car is the car you drive at the moment and you have the most fun about.
Bob, in October, I had the privilege of visiting you, Linda, your collection, and you've named most of the cars in your collection. But, you know, I've had dreams ever since I left your facility of an old 46 Beetle that you have, or had, and I was thinking, boy, that would be one that personally I would like to have, because I like cars that not everybody has. I like unique stuff. I like to share my cars with people. So if you have a unique car and you put the time and effort into it to make it right, if you can't buy it right, you know, if you don't find that original car, then that 46, and all my travels around the VW community, you don't see too many 46s. So that would be an awesome car. So my pick would be that 46 that's in your collection. I also thought of the ladder truck. Ed, our photographer, if you remember, I said, I need to buy this for our photographer. I took a bunch of pictures of that. The ladder truck, I'm kind of like you. Okay, I'll take the 46. And I got thinking, boy, there's a nice cabriolet and then a 23 window. And it's like, who's your favorite kid? Well, I've got 2. They're both my favorite. So, but the 46 would be my choice.
Thank you.
Mike, I might disagree with you. I'm going to tell you why. Because I know that you always like the best, and you always like the first vehicle that comes out. So your favorite car would be the 1933 prototype that Ferdinand Porsche built.
Does it look like my pockets are that big?
So that would probably be your favorite car if you could get your hands on it.
Probably.
Yeah.
I have to agree with both Mike and Bob that I don't think I personally could come up with a one favorite car. I have several in my collection, and I've had hundreds over the years. if I had to pinpoint one, I had a ratty old 74 Beetle that I drove for many, many hundreds of thousands of miles until the body finally rotted away. I think that was one of my favorite all-time cars because I didn't have to worry about it. It was still a neat-looking car. It ran good. I had it mechanically built the way I wanted it, and I could drive it anywhere. I don't mean to surpass my split window or anything else that I have that are equally nice cars, but this ratty old car, it had heart, and I miss it. Someday I'll have another one.
Yeah. I go, just hearing you say that, I go back to what Bob said, is that normally my favorite car is a car I'm driving at the time. There's a reason I'm driving it. And,
You pick the car you drive that day because you're gonna like to drive that car. So that start to be your favorite car of the day. That's for sure. So I mean, the more enjoyment, the more fun. I mean, I have something like when it keeps up and it keeps driving, it's fun. It's just fun to go back to the basics of post-war Europe and just see like how did people manage to get around in these days. I mean, I got cars that are 50 years or older, and people pampered their whole life like it was their baby. I mean, I remember my granddad, when he came home, the Beetle was dried with towels, and he was sleeping under blankets, better blankets than my grandma did. so it's just like how nice they pamper, and you never own really a car, you just conserve them to pass them on to the next generation. Because we will pass out way before the cars pass out.
So you know what my favorite car of the day is? The 55 that I backed out of my garage this morning. Did you notice I backed the car out for you?
Yeah, I was in the garage and the garage was empty actually.
Oh no, what's Bob going to do?
But that's a very nice car, and I like to thank my friend Bill Bowman from St. Louis to grant me that car. And that's also a lot of people say like, did you like that car? That car is something special. Back in '99, a couple of people from the United States, they had a crazy idea to drive with their cars to Europe. Not really driving, they shipped them and they drove in Europe. So they did a whole tour, they called it a Back to the Fatherland tour. And that own car I drive here now, that was on my own parking lot in Belgium. Can you imagine like roughly 10,000 miles away from here or 8,000 miles away from here, and the same car I can drive here like I used to see at home. That means a lot to me.
Richard, how about you?
I have a clear all-time favorite. It's a 1969 Volkswagen Thing. Now, a lot of you are going to say, Volkswagen Thing, 1969, they only had them in 73 and 74. But over in Europe, they had them from 69 through to 78. This was ex-Belgian army. It was the most beat-up vehicle I've ever owned. It had a dent in every corner, camouflage paint. A horse had eaten the hood. But it also had a 2-liter Type 4 twin-carb motor in it. On reduction boxes, you needed an entire interstate, the width, to do 100 mile an hour, which I did just once. That was enough. But it was just such fun off-road that that was the most fun vehicle I've ever owned and the most beaten up.
And Larry, how about you?
I would say my favorite Volkswagen would be a 1966 Type 3 variant. And the reason I'm saying that is my first car prior to that Volkswagen was a 64 Bel Air. So you could imagine going from a 64 Chevy Bel Air to a 66 variant. Quite a change. But I bought that car. I'm trying to remember what I paid for it. It wasn't very much, but to me it was a lot of money at that time. So I would say that would be my favorite car because it was my first VW at the time. When VWs were still sold at a dealer and you could go and buy a brand new car or a brand new VW Beetle, which I did in 1971, and I believe I paid $1,400 brand new, of which I borrowed $1,300. So.
We still do that today.
We still do that
The
today.
dollars are just bigger. There's more zeros there.
To go along those same lines, if you guys could go back and you could look at the hobby as the cars, the array of cars that are out there. Oh, there we go. Can you hear me now? Good.
Okay.
To look at the array of cars that are out there now, and to go out and to make an investment, and to offer any advice to the folks here, what would you look at as far as the best value for investment?
I would say not one particular car. There's gears, there's bugs, there's Type 3s, but an original car. It's always the original car that is worth the high dollars. So even if it's slightly customized, put it back to original. But as Bob knows only too well with his collection, a car in original paint that is in original condition, if you can find it, those are the ones that are going to be worth the big money.
I think looking at vehicles from an investment standpoint, bus market is so strong right now. We see it in the auctions across America. And, who would ever have thought 5 years ago, 10 years ago, that you'd see buses crossing a Barrett-Jackson auction block setting just huge records. And I think that should be an inspiration to anybody involved in this hobby that, these cars are worth a lot. Not only are they great cars, but the potential value of them, I think that's pretty cool. Being a collector, I look at downstream value. I mean, I wouldn't be a collector. I mean, I collect from my heart, and I'm not a seller. I am a collector. But I think anytime you make an investment in a car, you need to be looking at what does the future offer you. Therefore, you're right, Richard. You do buy the more original stuff. And I think that sometimes you look past a prudent buyer looks past some of the obvious stuff that a non-prudent buyer, like wrong wheels and just some of the stuff that you can easily replace. I mean, it's easy to replace a set of wheels, even if someone's put on disc brakes on a car. You look at the originality of it, you can always go back. I think there's oftentimes a lot of bargains that people go to sleep on and looking at original cars. I was looking at a 63 out in the for sale area. I'll give a plug on a car. You don't see many cars of that age with original pans still in them. This car was just spectacular as far as original pans in it. And that's something that I would look at, because if the pans are original and haven't been replaced, I can tell you there's a lot of other things in that car that are going to be in very strong condition. Other things may be cosmetic, but you can buy these certain things piece by piece and put them back original. So I thought that was a nice car. It just showed up today.
That's a very good point, Mike, the originality of a car, and Richard as well. I travel the Midwest for some of my clientele looking for vintage cars, Volkswagens in particular, because that's what I specialize in. And there's many a very nice car out there, but it's the originality that really strikes my eye. And I've oftentimes passed up on a very nice car and recommended that they buy kind of a more of a shabby car that's in more original condition. In some cases, we've restored them. In some cases, we've simply polished them up and left them in original state as they're only original once. But I'm strongly in agreement.
Mike, let me go back to the bus. So you bought the subject of the bus, and I would probably most of the public don't understand some of the market forces that are driving the prices going up on buses. Most people don't realize that there's fewer and fewer buses in the United States for one reason only. Europeans are coming over here and buying. Bob probably knows this. The bus market in the UK is probably the #1 growing market in the UK. The value of a Volkswagen bus in the UK in the last 10 years has probably quadrupled in price. There are people from the UK and in Europe in general that come to the United States and buy buses to take them back and refurbish them. So the value of a bus within the United States, it's increasing because of the market changing. People taking the buses out of the country. There's fewer buses here, which means the supply and demand takes hold. So a lot of people in the general public just don't understand that these market forces are in play now in our market here in the United States. So I thought that would be interesting.
It's truly amazing. It's true, the value of the buses. I know from insiders that there's 3 buses sold in the last month. This is only like 30 days for over $250,000 each. Okay, they were rare. Okay, they were deservable. But after all, it stays a bus. You can do investment-wise, but let's go forward. Larry, you mentioned that there is a strange way of a driving force of the value of a bus. That's true. But from the other side, besides the export, because you always can bring them back if you really want, it's only the shippers that make money on cars. But if you go back, there's also an investment. I mean, people don't trust banks. There is money in the world, and they just start to collecting in diversified things. Art never went that high lately like it went today, and also like buses. They do real weird things because it's the #1 thing that goes up. But from the other end, maybe we have seen the high rises. I don't say they're going to depreciate. I don't going to say they're going to highly appreciate. They will appreciate, but I think they've almost bottomed out now in value. If you really ask me, as investment-wise, what car to buy, I would say a Ghia. A Ghia is a unique car. It's a perfect designed Italian car. Knows anybody here a better design like an Italian design? Everybody goes crazy for Italian design. Furniture, cars, I mean, a lot of things. Italian design is the best. It's German made. I mean, German made, that's quality all over the world. You go to China, these people will agree that German engineering is the best in the world. Like, that's what they're known for. I don't want to say anything about other countries, but I mean, that's what they're going to say for. It's easy to drive. I mean, people today who buy a car mainly want to drive on a tour, on a rally, on like a Mille kind of thing. I mean, but that's the whole thing. Enjoy your car, enjoy your investment. See something you bought with your money you worked that hard for. Like, put it in a bank, put it in a saving account, you don't see nothing. Put it in a car, you see it, you can taste it, you can show it to your friends, and you can drive it, you can enjoy it.
See, Bob, the bus is what got us in trouble here at Corvette Funfest. And why I say Corvette Funfest, at Corvette, they come one car, two people. So as we started getting into the Volkswagen Funfest and we would do planning, we go, okay, we've got this many cars pre-registered, and then we'd say that would equal about this many people, and then the buses show up. And there was more than two people on a bus, so we go, we got to get out of the Corvette mindset at Volkswagen because they come more than two per vehicle. But you said something I think that's key is that you mentioned art, you mentioned collectability, and when I think of buses, I think of art. Buses and all the half cabs, the double cabs are, to me, they're art. I don't think there's a vehicle around that's ever been produced that is more unique than the variations of all the different buses. And I think when you look at art, when you look at the history of automotive history, you look at design, I think the bus is way, way at the top because there's just so many cool features, whether it's a 21 window, a 23 window, the barn. I mean, think of the versions of buses. And if you had one of each, you'd have a pretty good sized collection in and of itself. But then if you look at the total production, the vehicles that have survived, the buses are going to win, I think, hands down, because they're unique vehicles with a lot of utility, a lot of design, functionality, just cool vehicles.
They've been all over the place. You have the hippie movement, you have the Wirtschaftswunder, like they say in German, like the rebuilding of that completely teared down Germany after the war. There was nothing left anymore in that country, and the bus helped big time to build that country. Everybody has fond memories on a bus. His grandfather or uncle, everybody used to own a bus and a Beetle, and like, to continue a little bit, like Beetles, I think they're a nice investment, especially when they're original, but there is many. Even original cars, there is still a lot of original cars out there. I mean, there is countries like, for an example, north of Europe, in Scandinavia, like Sweden, they pampered the cars. They had the money to buy the car after the war with all the options on them. So they were nice. It's a very dry country, and they don't have the sun like, for an example, in California or Arizona. So also the interiors, the rubbers, it's a lot of originality. But if you see, when you see investment-wise, that's one thing. Personal investment-wise, I just was talking to a friend, and he said, like, what you like particular about the car, what you would buy. To me, it matters if the car is original, like it came from the factory. I know there is no part numbers or no chassis numbers or no serial numbers on a bumper. But to me, in my heart, in my soul, it matters that the bumper original from the car is still on the car. It just gives a peace of mind. It's like personal, but it's these little things that makes a difference and that keeps this diversity of the hobby so big for me.
Yeah. That was one of my questions to you last night when we were downtown. What does a hobby in the Midwest, in this case Effingham, Illinois, how does it look compared to the hobby in Europe?
Well, Volkswagen Volkswagen people are the same all over the world, I guess. I mean, they love a car, that little round little thing, and mainly it starts always with a Beetle. You start with a Beetle that you drove to high school or whatever, and then you're gonna buy a bus or a Gia, but mainly the most people, they start with Beetles. And it's just because you love something particular that's different. That's the whole thing. I mean, when the first Beetles came to the United States, the most people, they just looked like, what a weird fun car. And they were actually making a little joke by it. But of course it was good on the fuel in the United States against these fuel-consuming monsters, if I can call the V8s like that. In Europe, we thought different. Like when I bought my first Beetle, my dad asked me if I was really mad, something that burned so much fuel. Because we had these very small little cars, and we had the diesels back then, and we had and I mean, a Beetle was just an old-fashioned car that consumed too much fuel. It was nice to see that difference. But collection-wise, and if you see the hobby, I mean, it's different weather, and you feel a little bit different, and maybe the setup is a little bit different. But after all, the turnout of the Beetles, there is yellow, there is orange, there is all kind of colors. There is with roof rack, there is without roof rack. There is with the wheels, they're lowered and they're higher. And I mean, but we see the same things at home. These are different Beetles, but actually the heart of the Beetle owner, I think it's all the same. Traveled all over the 6 continents and saw VW shows everywhere. I mean, it's just one big community. And the proof came in 2000 with the millennium, with the opening of the internet, the forums. If you go on Osama.com, you meet just everybody all over the world. You meet people from Japan, you meet people from Italy or from Australia and New Zealand or from Africa. It's so nice to have like a world community just around that little cart that was just mentioned to transport 4 people and some potatoes.
That's true. Mike, you know, I've traveled all over the world. I've been probably in every country like you have, and the one car that you will see practically in every country in the world is a Volkswagen Beetle. I've been to Nigeria, I've been to Kenya, I've been to countries all over the world, and you'll find a Volkswagen Beetle there. You'll find it in Russia, you'll find it in Poland, you'll find it almost in any country in the world. So I wanted to add a little bit to what Bob was saying about when the Volkswagen Beetles came to the United States. First cars came here officially, I believe, was 61 or 62. I think the dealer started. Some of them came in gray market, but fuel wasn't a consideration back then. I think gas cost, 15 cents a gallon, 10 cents a gallon back then? So the cost and how many miles a gallon, nobody even thought about that in those days. We were into muscle cars, Mike?
Yeah.
Correct? The more gas that you could blow through that carburetor, the happier you were. So
We call it torturing hydrocarbons.
there you go. There you go. So that wasn't a consideration. I think the Volkswagen Beetle took hold on in the United States on college campuses, became very popular. Putting as many people inside of a Beetle used to be a very popular hobby, and phone booths. So I think that's where the Volkswagen Beetles originally took hold here in the United States, and they became extremely popular. At one time, dealers could not get enough Volkswagen Beetles into the dealerships, and a business grew. And for all of you that know who IEP is, IEP started by bringing in gray market Beetles from Europe, from soldiers that were stationed in Germany, were coming back, and they would buy those cars and bring them in. And eventually, as those cars came to the market and people needed parts, they started putting parts inside of the cars and bringing them into the United States. So that's a little bit of history of the aftermarket, how it started here.
Those are great comments. Looking at the collectability of these cars that we have here today, do you ever see the water-cooled Volkswagen surpassing the collectability of the air-cooled?
I'll grab that question in a hurry and say no, but that's my passion
Mike's
and my belief.
that, right? They'll never do it. They'll
No,
never.
Truthfully,
they'll never.
we think we see the air-cooled hobby getting stronger and stronger, even though the car, there seems to be less. There's more resurrected. There's more interest in them.
Absolutely.
I'm
You
seeing
know,
that right now.
I think one of the things that I really enjoy about, and I say this all the time about the air-cooled side, is the entry point of the vehicle for young people. And we wouldn't be on this stage if we weren't car people, if we weren't car guys. And the last time I looked in the mirror, I was older than the day before, so to speak. And, you know, our hobby tends, as car people, our hobby tends to be aging. But the VW, the air-cooled side is a market that brings in young people. And I really, really enjoy that because You know, if I were to get kids hooked on anything, it would be cars, and this is a great entry point, a great vehicle, and I think that's part of the momentum that drags the air-cooled VW forward and will continue pushing it forward. That's just my opinion. Guys, any thoughts on air-cooled versus water-cooled?
There are certain water-cooled models that take off in their own sort of small niche market. For example, the Audi Quattro and the Golf R32 and models like that. But they're never going to compete with the air-cooled market. They're minimal. But for the people that are passionate about them, for those guys, they'll always be around, and they often come to shows and that kind of thing. There is some following of the Golf GTI. The 1976 through 84 Mark I Golf GTI is a classic in Europe. Hasn't really taken off in the States, but it might come here. But again, you do see some of those kind of models at the shows in Sacramento and places like that, but it's never going to be on the same scale.
I'm the same opinion here. I must say, like in Germany, if we see there is a big movement of the water-cooled, but there is a big difference also. Like if you go for the air-cooled, they build up that nation. If you go for the water-cooled, people collecting because they remember from high school or from college, because that was the car they drove. They're fairly inexpensive now. You can fix them cheap because the parts are everywhere in Europe. I mean, that's a part of the success. Air-cooled becomes, I mean, it's an entry to collecting, but it's already a real collectible car, and it's also like collectible prices. If you want the original parts, you have to search the internet. You really have to pay the price plus the shipping and all that. Well, the water-cooled will never reach that goal. Well, even I understand the guys that do it, because I started this hobby with driving as a daily driver with a Volkswagen Beetle. I mean, nothing less than that, a Super Beetle, 1973, and it was a hell of work. I remember like the day of yesterday to weld everything, because I didn't know how to weld, but I was so strong that I wanted a Beetle, and I started welding. And I'm sure the kids of today, or the youngsters of today, they do the same with their Golf. They want that car so bad, so they go for it, and they spend the money that they make very difficult sometimes to get that car on the road.
So you're 73. Did you buy that new in 73? You would have been 8. Just making fun of you, Bob.
You know, I was
you
16
hurt
in
me last night
1980.
when you made that comment in 1965. Come on.
No, I was 16 in 1980, and that was the last year they sold Beetles new, and we're only legal age to drive in Belgium from 18 years on. So, I mean, for me, it was an old car. When I started, all my buddies, they thought it was a cool car, but all the girls in the groups, they thought it was the car for grandma, because it was still the old car on the road. I mean, and I couldn't score anything with my Beetles, even I thought I would. That's serious.
If you want to score on a thing, ladies always
you probably
think
wouldn't
are
score in
really
the
cool.
United States either with the Beatles, so you're not alone in Europe.
Now, just to take you guys down memory lane along those same thoughts. There is tell us about what invoked your passion and love, or your first experience with the air-cooled Volkswagens.
Well,
We'll let Richard
Mine
start.
can't be
It's not gonna
mentioned
be
in
good.
front of a family audience. My first experience was actually my dad drove back from Italy. He was attached to the U.S. Army with NATO down in Naples, and in 1965 he bought a 1200cc D-engined Code, so it'd be 34 horsepower sunroof bug, and he drove it for 2 years while he was down there. And like a lot of the U.S. Servicemen, if he kept it there for 2 years, he was allowed to bring it back to Britain duty-free. So the steering wheel was on the wrong side, and it was pretty beat up, but eventually when I reached the age of 18, I bought it off him. He wouldn't give it to me. And so that was my first bug. So my first memories are of that bug, and the fact the sunroof leaked and it was rotten because we were in North Wales, very close to the ocean. So it wasn't a good bug, but still have fond memories of it.
How about you, Bob?
Well, I grew up between the Volkswagens. My mom and my dad used to have one. My dad did something like for bakeries. He drove around and showed bakers how to use the products for the company he worked for. And he drove all over the country. Even Belgium is small. He covered with his 3 Beetles close to 1 million kilometers. This is not miles. It's like about 700,000 miles, I think, out of my head. And so basically he was so happy he could leave the Beetle alone and bought his first Volvo Amazon in 1969 and bought his first Mercedes in 1972. So by the time I came into Beetles and I wanted to buy a Beetle when I was 18, he thought I was nuts. Like I said, he thought it burned too much fuel and all that stuff. But my granddad, I think he gave me the real vibes, and he bought the first VW bus in Antwerp, in our hometown in 1950. So for the bakery at home, and I always have one picture of that, and I mean that's my holy grail. It's like that's where I come from. That 1950 bus being sold in Antwerp. It's so nice. And then when I turned 18, I thought Beetles were so cool. There were a couple of guys in my street that still drove around with Beetles. They make them like these rally things with wide fenders and whale tails and all that kind of stuff. And I thought that was real cool. And by the time I bought my first Beetle, they sold theirs. So actually, I was on my own. And like I said, my buddies thought they were cool, but the girls, they thought it was just an old-fashioned old car for the grandma to bring the kids to school or to do groceries. But I always loved my first Beetle, even like Richard. It was not the best Beetle you can imagine. It was rusty. I welded. I learned to weld on that car because I didn't know how to weld. And so you have just fond memories on every first car, especially when you fix them up yourself. That's what I try to teach my children. Like when you want a car when you're 18, fine, buy one and make it. You're going to respect that much more, and you're not going to do crazy things with it.
That's a good point. How about you, Darby?
My first memory of the Beetle came in 1967, and my sister bought one brand new. And I can remember riding around, as maybe you can too, in the itchy wool lined back compartment behind the back seat on a hot summer day. And can still feel that wool prickling in my back to this day. That was the first Volkswagen in our family. My sister kept it for 2 years, moved to California, and when she came back looking for a car, my dad set out to find her another Beetle because he actually drove her car more than she did. Dad found her a car, and between the 2 towns over, purchasing it and driving it back home for her, decided she couldn't have it, and he kept it for himself and went and bought her another one the next day. So that kind of started the Beetle collection in our family. My parents were both from Minnesota. My grandfather came down and visited. He fell in love with it, went back home at 80 years old and bought a Beetle for himself, a beat-up old 59. And when I got my driver's license in 79, I followed suit. By then we had 5 in the family, and it's all been, I don't want to say downhill, but it was all history from there. And I think total in our family we've had close to 250, maybe 300 Volkswagens. Can't keep track, but we all collected them one stage at one stage or another, and I just kind of took that passion and turned it into a business.
Truly a family of Volkswagen lovers there.
Yes.
Larry?
Steve, I think something that's interesting in this is that when we bought Volkswagens, when I bought my second Volkswagen, it wasn't a classic car. It was a new car. This wasn't a classic. I wasn't a collector. So if the question is why did I buy a Volkswagen back in the late 60s, 71, 72? The reason I bought a Volkswagen was simply because it's all I could afford at that time, and it was considered one of the more reliable cars. I had a 64 Bel Air, and I was spending days and nights just keeping that thing running. When I bought a Beetle, actually I had the variant first and had no problems at all. And then I bought a 71 Super Beetle. And the summer prior to entering college, I decided I had moved down to Miami to go to college there, and I decided I heard about the Summer of Love in San Francisco, California, and I took my 71 Super Beetle and I drove from Miami to San Francisco to spend the summer in San Francisco, and I drove that car by myself to San Francisco, spent the summer there, and came back, and that car didn't give me one single problem. I didn't change a part, I didn't change a spark plug, I didn't change a filter, I didn't do one thing to that car. So the reason I fell in love with the Volkswagen Beetle was simply economics, and it was reliable, and that car was always there for me. And it was one of the few cars in my life that I could always depend on that car. And if it did break down, even an idiot at that time, and I considered myself an idiot when it came to cars at that time, I could fix it. So it was simply economics. It wasn't a collector's item. It wasn't for value. Actually, at that time, used Volkswagen was depreciating in value. in the 70s. So there wasn't any collection aspect to it, monetary gain that you were going to get from the car. It was a reliable car. Don't forget, we didn't have Japanese cars. There was no Toyotas or there was no Nissans. At that time, Datsun had come in, I think in 71, if I'm not mistaken, or 69, there was some Datsun. Nobody wanted a Japanese car. In those days, Japan was synonymous with garbage, cheap. So nobody wanted a Japanese car, and it was non-existent. So if you go back to the history, when you're making a decision of buying a car back in the 60s or in the 70s, a German car was considered a reliable car, and a Volkswagen was considered an extremely reliable car at a price second to none. And this is a lot of people got involved in Volkswagen strictly for the economics, not for the collection value. I had no idea that my 71 Beetle in 30 years was going to be worth X amount of dollars. I could care less in 1971 was going to be worth. I just wanted it to get me to San Francisco. So that's my story.
Well, we're going to wrap up with Mike here and then open it up to the audience for a couple of questions.
Well, I think a lot of folks know that I'm from a big family with a lot of older brothers, and I was influenced in 1966. One of my older brothers bought a new 66 Beetle and then asked me to drive it along with his wife and new baby from Tampa, Florida, basically to Effingham. And that was my first experience. And then I had a brother saying, okay, now when you see other Volkswagens, this is what you do. You flip your headlights. He said, now I'm going to tell you how to tell the difference in years. So I was 17 at the time and starting to get indoctrinated into the nuances of each different Volkswagen that you would see and what it meant to be a VW owner. You know, you had to acknowledge that other owner, and that's kind of synonymous within the Corvette community also. Yep. But in 1969, I traded in my 62 Chevy four-door sedan for a new 70 Karmann Ghia. And I was just thinking on this weekend, 42 years ago, I was in a Karmann Ghia down in the Missouri Ozarks in a rainstorm, and my windshield wipers, I think the nut came off.
The pivot. You got a flat.
Yeah, I was thinking. I wasn't thinking about being in the VW business.
Yeah.
Man, this is a bad rainstorm, and I have no windshield wipers. So, a lot of people ask, why Corvettes, why Volkswagen? Both cars have been in my family since the early '60s, and to me, they're one and the same vehicle because the people that own them are passionate, they're enthusiastic about the cars, and each Volkswagen and each Volkswagen owner has a story about why they own the car, and they even know the prior story of the car, and I think that's fascinating. That's part of the excitement of owning it. We've talked a lot about value in the cars, and as a collector, you have to look at it that way, but the real value are you guys and gals that own them. The friendships that are developed amongst the owners at events like this around the world, and that transcends any value when you talk about economic value, because you can have a big stack of dollars, but at the end of the day, if you don't have a big stack of friends, you really have nothing. And that's what events like this are all about, is the friendship, the camaraderie that is built, the expectation of who am I going to see at this event, because I've seen them there every year. That's the fun of owning the car. But it's got to start someplace. There has to be what was the passion that got you to buy that first VW.
Yeah.
And once that's the admission price to a life of enjoyment. So once you have one, that gets you on the grounds here, so to speak. And once you're on the grounds here, there's a big commonality of interest, enthusiasm.
A lot of commonality with the car, and obviously we're here for 3 days, and we speak to hundreds of people. And because we have the commonality of the Volkswagen Beetle, bus, whatever you have, there's a kinship immediately. It's so easy to speak to people here. There's no awkwardness when you meet somebody for the first time and you talk to them, because we have that connection of that car.
Yeah. What I see is connection. I was looking out in the audience and I see different T-shirts from years going by. That's how I gained the connection.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let's ask anybody in the audience any questions for an individual on the panel, for the panel as a whole. Any topics anybody wants to bring up? the introductions. Starting on our far right, we actually have Richard Davies. He is with Mid-America Motorworks. To his left, we have Bob Van Heyst from, he's the founder and owner of BBT. In the middle, we have Dr. Darby Milnor. He's the owner of Midwest AutoSavers. And then we have Larry Molina, who is president of J&L International.
I can't hear him, but.
I'm sorry, what was the last part of your question? Did you say?
Well, I can answer that question because Mid-America's got one. We have them right in that tent right there. There's one right there in that building right now. Yep. We used it yesterday. Somebody had a dune buggy. We changed the alternator, and he had to change the pulley, and we used it. I don't know who it belongs to, Mike, but we have one here.
Probably belongs to me then.
Well, okay.
More than likely.
It belonged to you in past tense.
It belonged.
It belonged.
Was it an ED?
at the end, yeah. If you talk to me in the back of the show here, I can work something out with you here. No, I don't know. I don't think it's.
I can't answer
It's
that
somebody's
question.
tool, and who makes it? Does anybody know?
Richard, you know
Richard,
what tool
you
he's
know?
talking about?
I know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't have it available at the moment. It's kind of a job in progress to remake it, and also to take the 36 mil socket, of course, for the rear hub, and the 46 mil for the bus.
I think you guys sell the 36 millimeter that you can put a half.
We sell the sockets, yeah.
And did it with a hammer. That works very well.
Yeah.
We sell the socket, and you can buy a 1/2-inch drive bar, or you can sell a 3/4. If you actually put a piece of scaffold tube on the end of that, you've got that's the easiest way to undo those big nuts because they're 217 foot-pounds. Yeah.
Okay.
I think you better buy US made, not China made.
We're talking about German cars. Probably has it from Germany. They still sell them new, and they never break. I mean, you will break, but the bar don't break.
Any other questions from anyone? Technical, nothing too personal, but yes, sir.
Most famous? The most popular car that I ever owned, and I just sold it about a year ago, was the Corvette from Corvette Summer. It was Mark Hamill and Annie Potts, and we had people come from all over. They weren't necessarily Corvette people. They were just people that got associated and attached to the car through the movies. Certainly the Herbie cars that we have are very popular. I mean, I was out on the grounds this morning, and Herbie Goes Bananas in the bullfight.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually own in our collection the one that did the bullfight, and there's no driver in it, but in the back of the car is a steering mechanism. So they sat in the back and they put ballast in it and raised the car up.
Yep.
And that was pretty cool. And I thought, that's pretty cool. So that's an exciting car. The two Herbies in our museum from Herbie Goes Bananas are just cool because my boys were little babies when that movie came out, and now we own the cars. So I like things in life that you have an association with. Thanks, guys and gals.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause for our expert panel.
Thank you.